The mid-19th century saw a wave of Chinese immigrants arriving on Canadian shores, drawn by the promise of opportunity and a better life. Many were escaping economic hardship and political turmoil in their homeland, seeking a fresh start in a new world. Canada, with its burgeoning industries and vast landscapes, offered the hope of employment and prosperity. These early immigrants were primarily men who left their families behind, intending to earn enough to support them from afar and perhaps one day return home. These individuals, primarily from southern China, carried with them dreams of a brighter future, unaware of the challenges that awaited them. They envisioned a land of equality and fairness, where hard work would be rewarded. Little did they know that their arrival would be met with a mixture of curiosity, suspicion, and ultimately, discrimination. Their journey, however, was far from easy, and the reality they faced was often harsh and unforgiving. The arrival of Chinese immigrants coincided with the ambitious construction of the Canadian Pacific Railway, a monumental project that would connect the vast nation from coast to coast. The Transcontinental Railroad was a dangerous and arduous undertaking, and labor was desperately needed. Chinese workers, despite facing prejudice and cultural barriers, stepped up to fill the void. They endured grueling hours, hazardous conditions, and significantly lower wages compared to their white counterparts. They toiled tirelessly, blasting through mountains, building bridges over treacherous canyons, and laying down the very tracks that would unite Canada. Their contribution to the nation's development cannot be overstated. The completion of the railway was a pivotal moment in Canadian history, facilitating trade, communication, and national unity. Yet, as the last spike was hammered in, marking the railway's completion, the attitude towards the Chinese workers took a turn for the worse. Ironically, the very success of the Canadian Pacific Railway, fueled by the sweat and toil of Chinese laborers, contributed to a surge in anti-Chinese sentiment. With the railway complete, many white workers found themselves unemployed and in direct competition with the Chinese for scarce jobs. Economic anxieties, coupled with existing racial prejudices, created a fertile ground for discrimination to take root. Politicians and labor leaders alike began to exploit these fears, scapegoating the Chinese community for the economic woes of the time. They were portrayed as an economic threat, accused of stealing jobs and depressing wages. This narrative resonated with some segments of the population who viewed the Chinese as different, alien, and a threat to their way of life. This climate of fear and resentment paved the way for the implementation of discriminatory legislation, the most prominent being the infamous Chinese head tax. Section 4. The price of entry, implementing the Chinese head tax. In 1885, the Canadian government, bowing to pressure from anti-Chinese groups and seeking to restrict further immigration, enacted the Chinese Immigration Act. This act levied a head tax on every Chinese person entering Canada. Initially set at a hefty $50, a significant sum at the time, the tax was a blatant attempt to discourage Chinese immigration and limit their growing presence in the country. This marked the beginning of a dark chapter in Canadian history, one that would see the systematic marginalization and exclusion of an entire community based solely on their ethnicity. The implementation of the head tax had a devastating impact on Chinese immigrants. It placed a heavy financial burden on families, often forcing them into debt for years just to afford entry into Canada. Many were separated from their loved ones, unable to reunite due to the prohibitive cost. The head tax served as a stark symbol of discrimination, sending a clear message that the Chinese were not welcome in Canada. Section 5. A taxing legacy, escalation and exclusion. The Chinese head tax, far from being a temporary measure, became a tool of systematic discrimination that was escalated over time. In 1903, the tax was raised to an exorbitant $500, effectively barring all but the wealthiest Chinese from entering Canada. The impact on families was devastating, separating loved ones and shattering dreams of a better life. The escalating head tax exemplified the growing hostility towards the Chinese community, reflecting a broader shift in public policy towards exclusion. The tax went beyond its financial implications, serving as a constant reminder of the second-class status imposed upon the Chinese in Canada. It created a climate of fear and uncertainty, forcing many to live in the shadows and endure prejudice in silence. The head tax was a cruel and discriminatory policy that left an indelible mark on generations of Chinese Canadians. Section 6. Echoes of Exclusion. The Chinese Exclusion Act's enduring impact. The Chinese head tax, while a significant barrier, was not the final blow. In 1923, the Canadian government enacted the Chinese Immigration Act, more commonly known as the Chinese Exclusion Act. This draconian piece of legislation effectively barred all Chinese immigration to Canada. Families were torn apart, with those already in Canada prevented from reuniting with their loved ones back home. The Exclusion Act solidified the segregation of the Chinese community, denying them basic rights and opportunities afforded to other Canadians. The impact of the Exclusion Act reverberated through generations. Chinese Canadians were denied the right to vote, own property, or pursue certain professions. They faced widespread discrimination in housing, education, and employment. The Exclusion Act created a legacy of pain, hardship, and injustice that continues to resonate in the present day. Section 7. Resilience in the face of adversity. The Chinese Canadian spirit. Despite facing relentless discrimination and hardship, the Chinese Canadian community demonstrated remarkable resilience and determination. They formed tight-knit communities, supporting one another and preserving their cultural heritage. They established businesses, schools, and cultural organizations, creating a sense of belonging and identity in the face of adversity. Their spirit remained unbroken, fueled by a deep-seated belief in justice and equality. They challenged discriminatory laws in the courts, advocating for their rights and demanding recognition as equal citizens. Their struggle for justice was long and arduous, marked by setbacks and disappointments. Yet, they persevered, their unwavering spirit paving the way for future generations to claim their rightful place in Canadian society.